Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Two Docs and a Grunt. I am Luis Fonseca, Doc number one, retired Navy Hospital corpsman who spent 22 years on active duty, and during that tenure, I was also awarded the Navy Cross. Next is our partner, Nate.
And I'm Nate Emery. I did 22 years in the Marine Corps. I retired as a captain, 12 years enlisted time, 10 as an officer. Some of that time was in the infantry, and I currently work for DOD, and that's it.
Yep. That was from our Grunt, and I'm Doc number two. I'm Andrew Barry. I'm a psychologist and psychoanalyst. I specialize in working with veterans and first responders battling post-traumatic stress disorder. And with us tonight is Jason Salazar, who is former law enforcement. He invited myself, along with an organization he's part of, to participate in one of his podcasts, and I thought I'd I would offer him the same opportunity. So much for my so-called sense of humor. Anyway, I'll just read Jason's bio real quick here. He was or is deputy sheriff for the Denver and Jefferson County Sheriff's Departments for several years. He served as a member of the Sheriff's Crisis Intervention Team and the Leadership Steering Team, Special Housing Unit, and he was a field training and communications instructor. His experience and knowledge is heavily based on security and policy and procedure regulation. Mental health, lo and behold, and de-escalation techniques. He has an extensive background in risk managing situations to lead a positive outcome through security surveillance, conflict resolution, and mediation. And how I met Jason was he is part of an organization, a small kind of mom and pop insurance company that I had never heard of, who had reached out to me. One of the admin folks reached out to me, found my resume somewhere at the bottom of a bird cage. No, I'm serious. I'm kidding. Presumably on LinkedIn, and found out that I do this sort of thing that I do. And she said, "Would you consider going on a podcast with us?" And I said, "Okay. I'm not going to hold anything back because I have a very particular way of doing this, and it's a little unusual." I said, "You sure you want this?" And she said, "Believe me, Doc, you're exactly what we're looking for." And I said, "A lot you know." So anyway, we did a podcast. It was myself, Jason, and Lee Price. And that podcast went reasonably well, at least according to what I had been told. And so Jason is with us tonight. Welcome aboard, and let's have as much fun as we can with mental health and trauma.
Thanks, everyone, for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you for coming on board.
I'll start it off, man. How did you get into law enforcement to begin
So
with?
originally, it's kind of a interesting how I got to this career path. I originally focused primarily when I was in high school, did fire science, when I got out, got my EMT and said I'm going to go straight into the fire service. Started out volunteering, and then, back when I was applying for fire departments out in Colorado, it was about like hitting the lottery essentially of getting a paid position. So I was just going back and forth, and I said, I really want to do something in being a first responder. Saw Denver Sheriff was hiring, and then told my wife, I'm going to try it, and see how it goes, and then ended up going from the fire service to law enforcement.
Between fire service and law, and how many years did you put in? Or are you still in?
No, I left November of last year. So I would say this is my first year out of it. I'd say probably combined, probably about 7. I did volunteer firefighting. I was a lot younger. So this is my first year. Actually, this coming Monday is going to be my year anniversary with McNeil and Company. So survived my first year in corporate life, to say the least.
And so, what wow, so like in 7 years, what made you decide to you know, I guess walk away from law enforcement or first responding and then
It
go
was
into the mental health?
it was a pretty that's a great question. There's multiple things that led to it, but I guess ultimately, like what Dr. Barry was talking about, what I'm very passionate about is mental health, and that's something that I put to the wayside for my own life. So, my wife, she was a respiratory therapist. She worked in the emergency room. So, between her job, my job, it was so difficult. I guess. I mean, working holidays, weekends, working 16-hour shifts sometimes, and just
Right.
the constant overtime. It eventually got to the point that I said, I gotta do what's best for me and my wife, and that was to step away. Wasn't an easy decision. You know, you make, as well as everyone here knows, in that kind of job, military, you know, those people are your brothers and sisters that you can count on, you rely on. So it was definitely a really hard decision because, you know, these are people that I've really gone through some shit with, and you know have been there for me whenever I was struggling. So it was just for my mental health, for something that was just going to better me and my family essentially.
Understood. You know, that's I love that you say that because when I came towards the end of my military career, like it was kind of the same thing. I knew I was done not because I didn't love what I did anymore or I didn't love leading young men and women, but for my mental health, the betterment of my family, I knew it was time to hang up the hat and move on with
Absolutely.
them. So I can definitely understand that
Absolutely.
sentiment.
How long has it
A
been
year
since you
on
left?
Monday. Yeah.
Okay. Now, I know, of course, when you make a decision for your family and and your spouse, it's not something it's not something that people regret, but you find yourself, missing that
Yeah,
part quite a bit, or
it's funny you said that. I was actually just talking to my wife the other day, when we were out at dinner, and you just kind of think of some of these old memories you have, and you just laugh. I mean, in the moment, you're like, man, that really sucked to go through. But then I just could not help but laugh at it and think, man, I can't, I mean, you know, you guys understand. You tell stories that everyone's like, there's no way that could have happened, but you're like, if you actually didn't say that, nobody would believe you. You know, I would say the people I met in law enforcement were some of the greatest people I met. I had amazing mentors. I had people who trained me, people that I trained. So yeah, I would say there's some memories there that, yeah, I do miss, and like the camaraderie, that brotherhood aspect of it, and saying that, you know, we're all a huge family here. But the overall sense of the anxiety, my wife, you know, saying, you know, she's trying to call me when I'm supposed to be off of work, and then I'm not picking up my phone, and it's just kind of that panic that sets in. You know, those days I don't miss. Those days I don't miss having to call my wife after a 16-hour graveyard shift and say, yeah, we had this huge incident that happened, and, you know, I got stuck there. So, you know, but yeah, there are definitely things that I do miss.
yeah, that's hard when you're. That's the hard thing about nostalgia is it helps you forget the painful parts, right? And you find yourself. Yeah, you find yourself like, oh, well, if I had to, I could go back to doing
I know.
that.
And then you, on the flip side, then you have those moments that you're like, hell no. You go back and you're like, oh, I remember that day.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah.
And all I gotta do is go pick up my gear again and go,
Yeah,
oh yeah.
I'll tell you one thing. Anytime my lower back starts to hurt, I think of my old duty belt, and I'm like, nope, not gonna happen again.
Right? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, the reason why I asked you that question is I've only recently realized that, you talk to different people and you always wonder, it's like, how come that person is doing so well, in their next life, and why am I, where I'm at, or why is somebody else having such a hard time? And there's a question that came up, and I realized that the situations of how we all left were all so different, and I just didn't realize that was what the difference was between my situation and other people's.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and everyone's got their own reason to leave. I mean, law enforcement, especially law enforcement, was a revolving door. I would train someone, and then 2 weeks later, they're out the door. Everyone, some people left for money, and I think, especially if you're newer and you leave, it's usually because whether you get a better job offer, but the longer you do it, the more you start realizing I got to look out for my mental health, and that's kind of was the apex for me. Was that I said, I got to do this for, for me and my family.
Let me ask you something, man. Again, only if it's okay to ask. When did you start noticing that something was going on?
I would say the moment that when I would be at work and then the first thing I thought about was going home and drinking. That was probably the moment that I realized that there's a bigger issue at hand, is that when the only way I could actually go to sleep, because I'd usually sleep about 3 to 4 hours a night on shift, like when I would, the week that I'd be on. So the only way usually I'd be able to go to sleep is if I started pouring whiskey. And then that's kind of when I started noticing, but that's kind of where I also said, it's common, it's a stressful job, but it really was until my wife said, hey, we have way bigger problems here because you're like completely different. You're not even the same person that I remember. That's kind of the moment that I was like, oh my God, something's really off.
Right. That was your slap in the face.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, it was. And, by the grace of God, my wife we've been together for 10 years now, and we actually met in EMT school. She worked in the emergency room, so she understood, with the stress levels there are. But yeah, that was definitely the moment she's like, yeah, we got a problem here, and that I had to finally understand that, yeah, there's bigger issues at hand.
About how far were you into that career when you came to that realization?
I'd say probably about a year and a half in. Yeah. I worked in the special housing unit in the detentions. So we had the difference with that working in there is that we worked with only pretty much mentally ill and violent offenders. So usually we worked 12-hour shifts, but what would end up happening is whether, you get into a extraction or a use of force with someone, you get so burned out because all the stuff that you see every day and the people suffering and the screaming, just the weird stuff that, you never see. And eventually you're like, oh my God, like I gotta think of some way to cope with it. And I wasn't very big into talking to a counselor. I wasn't big into talking to a therapist because I always assumed, well, if I'm going to the department therapist, you're after my job. You're after my job. You don't want to help me. You want to see if I'm fit for duty. And even if I tell you some shit, and then they come back and say, oh yeah, you can't be in this career anymore because you opened up to me, and you were honest. So I'd say probably right around there. It started kind of, I started noticing a little bit, but I just didn't want to admit that I actually had a problem there and that, just wasn't coping with it the right way.
It's tough because you can be desensitized to something but not realize that it still affects you. It's like, it becomes routine. Like you hear the same kind of screaming over and over. Okay, it doesn't maybe make you stop and think about it as much, but it's still sinking. It's leaking into your brain, right? Yeah. Did you find that once you realize you'd come to that realization? I know for like me, it's been a journey. You do good sometimes. You do worse at other things. You might come to a realization of something that changes the way you see stuff. when you first came to that realization after your wife, mentioned it to you, did you find yourself then trying to hide it and act normal, or do you think that you were dealing with it
was
better?
definitely. I was like, hide it and just push it down as far as you can. Put on a good face and tell your wife, "Nah, there's nothing wrong there," because I don't think I was mentally at the point in my life yet where I understood the severity of it. So I was just like, I'm just going to push it down with some brown, and then move on, and then tell your wife, I'm fine. That was how I kind of lived, how I was in that career, and kind of, because even in that career, it's like, okay, you're at work, you can't show those emotions, you can't show how you may really feel inside. So it's like, no, just push it down and keep moving on.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I can imagine you don't want to end up being, or you don't want whoever's with you to maybe start looking at you as an additional patient, right?
That's a great point. I mean, because the unit I worked in, there was 3 of us. There had to be 3 of us who worked in there because the offenders we worked with. So I was like, I don't want my partners to know if I'm struggling, just like I'm sure a lot of them may not want anyone else to know. It's like, that's just, it kind of felt like that was kind of the culture, it felt like,
Yep.
Dave-
Yep. That's. Go ahead, Doc.
Oh, cool. Thank you. And I don't want to put any words in your mouth at all. But is it kind of like, did you kind of feel like if you told them that they would lose that sense of, oh, he has my back, or he has my 6, as we say in the military, right? Even I'm sure law enforcement says the same thing, but was it that kind of feeling as well too that kept you from maybe speaking to your coworkers? Or anyone else?
That's a great point. I mean, I didn't want anyone to think that I still couldn't do my job. I looked and said, our goal, just like anyone's goal in these kind of jobs, military, fire, law enforcement, is that everyone needs to go home at the end of the day. You're going to do everything you possibly can to make sure, you think about those people's spouses, that you're like, I want to get you home. And it's kind of that thought behind it of, I don't want to lose that brotherhood. I don't want people to think that I'm not going to be able to have your back or like be side by side with you if something goes down.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it was it actually wasn't until one of my sergeants came up to me and talked to me, and I was actually open with her about it, but that took a huge step to be able to actually say, yeah, there's some issues going on here.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's tough. Go ahead, Doc Barry.
It just occurred to me just now. The ideal absolutely is to get everybody home safe, but there's a piece of this that's missing. Let's say everybody goes home safe after seeing something or hearing something or all of the above that is beyond terrible. Let's say everybody survives it, but they're supposed to just go home to their families and act like it was just a typical day at the office. There's no processing or decompression time. So everybody's home safe in a physical sense, but emotionally, I wonder sometimes. What do you think?
I completely agree. I mean, you raised a great point, because you can go home just like I went home every night, but doesn't mean that I was there. I may have been there physically. I wasn't there mentally. I wasn't there emotionally. I was a skeleton essentially of myself. It's like robotic. Come home, get this awful belt off of my hip, and go change real quick and have some drinks, and then hopefully you go to bed. But that's not a way to live. So yeah, that's a great point. I mean, that's not. Yeah, you may technically physically go home, but you're really not home. You're in your own mind.
Yeah.
It's like you got all these people with you, and that the people that work with you have a certain perception of you, or they see you. There's a picture of you, right? And you're just hoping that they don't realize that some of those pieces that are that puzzle don't really fit together very well. Huh? And but I think kind of the dirty secret is that if everybody was to, to show their hand at the same time, and all realize, wow, we've all got pieces that we've forced together in there, and everybody's got some of the same issues.
Right.
But nobody wants to be the first one.
And I think
And test that one out.
yeah, and I think you're right with that, Nate. Is that once I guess our secrets or whatever come to the light, you realize that all your buddies next to you, male or female, right? Doesn't matter. So I don't want anyone listening out there to think that buddies, I'm just using as a male term. But your coworkers, whatever, like they're all going through the same shit. It's just who's going to be the first one to raise their hand and say, "Hey guys, we're all hurting. Let's not fucking bullshit anymore," right? But you don't want to. It's hard. It's really hard to do. It's an easy concept to talk about.
Exactly.
And it's I think too, it's like, so for you, Jason, realizing it and seeing it in yourself and trying to live with it is one thing. But how long was it before, like, say that sergeant that came to you? How far past the point when your wife came to you did the sergeant
It was
come to
actually
you?
pretty close to the same time. So that's kind of where I was like, okay, obviously, there's something here that that's going on, because I would say in the relative sense probably months. I wouldn't even say it was that long. That I was like, okay, maybe it's time to be a little more vulnerable right now. Maybe it's time to show a little bit of that side, but part of that was being vulnerable and then kind of snapping it back kind of quickly, because I was like, I don't like showing that. I don't like showing, like you said, showing your hand there. And it's like, well, I don't want you to know, people to know really what I'm, maybe experiencing, or just the exhaustion, and that's part of the thing that job, that amplified it, is like, sleeping 3, maybe 4 hours on a good night at night. It just add that up every single day. It's just like you're so tired, and it's like your head just goes in all kinds of different directions.
Yeah, we follow you. I don't think you're the only one that. There's some Fridays where I'd say there's some Mondays where I'm already looking forward to Friday, because I'm like, I can take a nap.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Or like when a whole work week goes by and you don't even remember your whole work week, because Jason, kind of like you said earlier, you're in such a robot mode. You get trained to do something exactly almost the same way, that it's so automatic and is so not, I want to say mundane, but it's such a routine. And then, like you said, then you have to come home and be a shell of a person, because like we say, right, you're physically home, but emotionally, mentally, you're not there. You're not there for your family or for yourself.
Yeah.
Even, right. So
Yeah. I tried everything under the sun. Melatonin. I did sleeping aids. I did everything, and and even I would say even a year out of it, I still struggle with sleep, because my mindset is the day before I start my work week, which now is on Sundays, I automatically, my mind goes to work mode. It goes to thinking about the week, thinking about what do I have to do starting tomorrow? How am I essentially going to kick this week's ass and get stuff done? But that's how I was before. I was like, when I started my rotation, before I'd start my rotation, I'm like, okay, I got to mentally prepare, and then that kept, it keep me up. So even now I still struggle with sleep still, because I'm still trying to process, like, it's okay to just leave work at work. Like, when you log off for the day, you're done. Like, you don't need to bring that home. I mean, even my wife says, like, I always laugh, because like my wife, she can like lay her head on the pillow and just go right to sleep. I'm like, I envy her because I'll be laying up there. It's 1 a.m. Tuesday night. I was up till 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was just dead tired the next day. And I was like, what the hell did I just do? I was like, I literally just screwed up my whole night because you can't shut your mind off. And that's part of still being only a year out of it. I'm still trying to learn how to process, like, just shut your mind off. It's okay just to go to bed, you know?
Right.
Yeah. And getting sleep and getting rest are not always
Exactly.
synonymous, right? Like there are those times when you're exhausted and you pass out and you don't remember going to sleep, and you wake up and all it takes is someone to go, "Oh man, you slept a long time. You must feel great." And you're like,
Exactly.
"I don't feel like I slept at all."
Exactly. I feel more tired
Let me
than
just-
when I went to bed.
Yeah.
What's up, Doc Barry?
Let me just point out the as we've seen with so many other folks that we've spoken with in this podcast. Let's look at the prime ingredients here of what we're talking about: crappy sleep, adrenaline blasts, irregular sleep, irregular shift work, maybe not the best diet in the world, no place to process, etc., etc. This is going beyond burning the candle at both ends. This is burning the candle at both ends on steroids times 10 to the 23rd with raisins mixed in. And after a while, the body and the brain, because they're all connected, begin to cry out, enough is enough. And the last thing, Jason, what you were talking about, every time you get up, you feel your lower back whistling at you because of that duty belt. Metaphorically, if I may be so bold, you're still wearing that duty belt,
Yeah.
man.
And, you know, and it's so I don't know if I told you this, Dr. Barry, when you were on our podcast, when we were talking with you.
Just call me Doc, will you?
Yeah.
Hey,
all right, Doc.
do me a favor. Just Doc.
Doc.
Yeah, because I'm not on duty. I feel like I'm in trouble. It's stuffy. Cut it out.
All
It's
right.
making me
All
nervous.
right. Well, let me tell you something, Doc. So I was sitting there, and when we were talking with you, I had this epiphany moment. And I was like, shit, I feel like he's talking. I was like, I feel like he's talking right to me right now. And that was part of, just like what you said, of still wearing that duty belt. Because I think when we had you on, I was like, I'm really curious of how this is going to go, because I wonder if it's going to resonate with me still. And I thought, oh, you know, I'm out of it long enough. It's not really going to do anything. And then it was like, just like that, I was like, holy shit. Nope. that brought something that brought it right back up. But you know, you raised a great point, because there's still things that my mind still goes to. I don't like sitting at restaurants with my back to people. I don't like, you know, because I just don't. We never, you know, even in the jail when we'd escort people around, or you know, people have tried all the time to grab people from behind and try to choke deputies out. And it's like, I still get uncomfortable with that. I still get uncomfortable with sometimes crowds, and like if it's super loud, it just raises some anxiety, because I'm like, yeah, it just, you know, sometimes can't stand it.
The nice thing about a wall is that it can't hurt you. That's why you're back.
Right. Yeah.
It's true. Number one, and number two, when there's all that noise going on around, this is something that I've noticed with the patients that I work with, as well as hearing vets and first responders talking in my own personal life, and that is sensory overload. When there's too much noise and too much action, it's like you don't have the bandwidth. And the anxiety starts going through the roof. Maybe you start getting irritable, temporal loss, etc., etc.
Yeah.
It's exhausting.
Yeah, it definitely is. So, Jason, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about as well. When I was reading your bio that you sent us over, I was really, really impressed with like the mental health and the de-escalation, and that's part of the work that you did. Could you talk a little bit more about that and exactly what that all entailed? Because to me,
absolutely. That was definitely something I was very passionate about when I got out of field training. well, I shouldn't say I got selected. I was voluntold you're going to the special housing unit, which was kind of like, it's like no one wants to go down there. It smells like shit down there. It's literally covered in it because it's a madhouse. So part of going through that, you can be selected to go to crisis intervention training to become part of the crisis intervention team. Crisis intervention team is a 40-hour course where it's actual, we have doctors on there that come and talk to us about actual de-escalation and dealing with mental health and how you can come to a resolution, whether it's someone, threatening to kill themselves, trying to assault you. So part of that, we had to go through different scenarios with actual actors. So they would come in and they would play a character and they'd say, I'm going to light myself on fire, I'm going to do this, this, and this. So depending on how you answer it is how they were going to behave. So that's how you had to, it really wasn't as much like written tests as like how can you use your mouth. So once I did that, working in the shoe, after working down there for a while, I just had this passion for mental health. My brother was diagnosed with schizophrenia probably 10 years ago, so I kind of knew a little bit, of the behaviors, but I also had a soft spot, I guess, because of that too. I also had a passion for that because I used to see him all the time, having issues. So for me, going through SHU and all that, using CIT was verbal de-escalation, or some places call it verbal judo. I pretty much just calling it just being a human. But it's just kind of recognizing the signs of when someone's manic, when someone's, up and down. And we could all, you knew these guys so well because that's all they would be is in SHU. So it was just all verbal de-escalation and just kind of just talking to them and trying to talk them off the ledge enough to get them safe. Doesn't mean that they're not going to do it again, but in that situation is getting them off the ledge far enough that you can actually help them.
Understood.
Let me just go into psychoeducation mode for the listeners. Schizophrenia, it's a term we hear often, and it's what's known as one of the psychotic disorders. Now, the word psychotic or psychosis, what that talks about is any one or more of our five senses, sight, smell, taste, touch, hearing, receiving stimuli from the environment that doesn't actually exist, which is to say the schizophrenics, those are the people who hear the voices in their heads, have hallucinations, feel like they're covered with spiders when they're actually not. That's one of the psychotic disorders, and it's treated by heavy duty narcoleptic drugs and tranquilizers, and it is the beast of all beasts. And you, Jason, you said you had a brother who developed it. Well, a dear friend of mine developed it also when he was in his adolescence, and he is institutionalized to this day with what's known as schizoaffective disorder, which for our studio audience, that means a combination of schizophrenia that I just talked about and bipolar disorder at the same time. It is a biochemical train wreck. Now, the other thing that caught my ear, Jason, what you're talking about is training to deal with emotionally disturbed people. Let me tell a story. Okay, when I was just starting grad school part 2, one of our instructors worked quite a lot with the police department, and the police department wanted to do some hostage and EDP, emotionally disturbed persons training, and they asked for and they were going to use what's known as a throw phone. And for anybody who doesn't know what that means, it's a portable phone that gets thrown into a house or an apartment where a hostage may be taking place, and that's when hostage negotiations begin to take place. So,
Wow.
oh yeah, guess who volunteered to play the paranoid schizophrenic with borderline intellectual functioning, who had a knife and was off his meds. Me. And the instructor, you guys who know me well see where this is going. This is when lovable, furry, fuzzy, warm, and lovable Doc Berry can hit a switch and become a complete psycho. So I said to the instructor, I said, how far do you want this to go? And he said, well, as far as you want to take it. And I said, you got it. So I went off the rails.
Full DSM on them.
Full I said, because I can hit the crazy switch anytime I want, okay? It's lingering beneath the surface. That's why I do what I do for a living. No, anyway. I just took it right to the wall. Now, what I didn't know at the time was this is taking place in an auditorium, and I'm down in the front on just sitting at a table acting like a complete lunatic. There were people in the back of the auditorium filing in and out who didn't know who I was. They were running out. They thought I was the real thing.
Oh, wow.
And what I did was I named my character. I said, my name is Joey. I can't find her, but I've got blood everywhere. And I'd slam the phone down. And then another call would come in. I had these guys running for about 45 minutes. And
Wow.
finally, Dr. Powers called he gave the all clear, stand down. And so the corporal who was leading this exercise brought in like 8 or 9 cops and said, okay, Joey, where the hell are you? I rather cheekily waved my hand because I could see these. I scared the hell out of them. And this guy said, okay, Doc, you did a hell of a job. That's about what it's like. And thanks for the participation. So I can not only take away the crazy, I can be the crazy. True story. But I don't know, Jason, if you ever did that kind of training.
Yeah.
But that's
Yeah,
what made me
we
think of
actually had a guy. He said he was going to light himself. They said he was at a gas station, and they're like, he's at a gas station, and he said he's going to douse himself in gasoline. So I eventually de-escalate him enough, but then I'm like, hey, can you hand me the lighter? He hands me a lighter, and I forgot to ask, do you have any other lighters on you? At the end of the scenario, the guy opened up his jacket and like 20 lighters fall out. But it teaches it. You know, that's what they trained you to do. Is like, hey, you don't know what you're gonna find, and working in the special housing unit was definitely the same way. It's like you're gonna see all kinds of weird things, and just you don't know where you're gonna be standing at. People swan dive off the ledges right onto their head, and you're just like, you don't know what you're gonna see. So yeah, it was definitely an experience. It was a greatest class I've ever taken in my life.
Wow. So SHU, that's what it stands for.
Yeah.
Special Housing
Yes.
Unit. I thought it was SHU, like.
Oh, like SHOE.
And it was just like a term that you guys use.
Okay.
Yeah, like a term you guys use. Just, you know what I mean? Each section, yeah.
I have a lot of kids
Yes,
live in a shoe.
We know. I thought it was solitary confinement. I'm glad.
Yeah, I
somebody
probably
just
should
explained
have
it.
started off with that SHU, Special Housing Unit. But yeah, that's the abbreviation that we use. So yeah.
So, you said your brother about 10 years ago was diagnosed with that, and that's what kind of, maybe sparked or started your path down wanting to educate yourself on mental health. And, you had, 7 years as a first responder. And so what are you doing now with that?
Oh yeah. So right now I work, like Doc Barry said, I work for McNeil and Company. I work in their risk management department. The really cool thing about McNeil is most of us in the risk management department are former first responders. So we understand how fire departments, and that's so me and Kayla, the one that we were on the podcast with Doc on. we were like, we really should have a podcast, but not only a podcast, but we really should have one about mental health for first responders, because it's such a prevalent thing. So me and her were talking one day, and we're like, all right, what do we call it? And we were talking about how there's such a stigma behind having with mental health. So that's where we came up with the name Breaking the Stigma podcast. And so, like,
nice.
I always try to, I know I wrote an article for McNeil on communications with mental illness, of just kind of different ways as a first responder you can talk to people, kind of how you have to, there's a totally different way, you have to talk. So that's something that, I'm really passionate about and want to continue to grow with. And that's why we had Doc on, we had a chief of mental health for a jail on, we've had peer support owner, a guy who owns a peer support company. So we try to bring as many different diversity that we can on the podcast, as well as people who are struggling or have gone through mental illness and mental health issues on the podcast, to just continually try to raise awareness.
Wow, that's amazing, Jason. I always love, hearing these stories, because it's kind of the same way as in my mind anyways, I can't talk about anyone else. You think you're alone with your mental health, and then you find out that you're not. And then you're like, okay, so now I want to do something about it. What should I do? And it seems like, okay, am I the only one trying to fight against mental health? And then you see that there's so many other people just as passionate as you are. And it's so refreshing for me personally when I come across people like you, Jason, that are so passionate. And it comes from a genuine place of caring, and not just, oh, it's the cool thing right now, right? Mental health is thing on the news right now, right? So it really does fuel me and my passion as well, Jason.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. It sounds like the more you learn, the more you want to help.
I try to do, as much as I possibly can, even if I'm not in law enforcement or first responder anymore. I still have such a passion for that. Veterans, first responders, doesn't matter what. I think that's just such a part of society that's just so overlooked still, that try to raise more awareness to get more resources out there. And we understood that, hey, maybe a podcast might be good, because if you're at the firehouse and you're working out, lifting weights, throw in your earbuds and listen to a podcast. And even though some people may say it's not my cup of tea, I don't want to really listen to it, that's fine. But I always look at it, even if it's one person that it can reach out to, is better than none.
Yeah, sometimes people are on let's say drive-by, right? They're in a season where they need a couple episodes of that, and it helps them reset and get back to where they were, and then they might go off and do something else for a while and come back again later. But at least you've got the content there for them to go find.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's and I listen to a lot of different motivational speakers as well, like E.T. and Les Brown, like the big ones, right? But it's the same thing. It's not like I listen to them every day, but it's those times that I need that reminder of, okay, this is how you got to get your mindset into, I wouldn't necessarily be successful, but to build some form of success. Same with these type of podcasts. All right, there's sometimes I need to rewatch some that I've done, or that us in this group have done, or other ones that I have found on the internet that I just need to rewatch for that day to remind myself how we go through these battles, right? How do we win these small little battles, so that way the mental health war doesn't beat us.
Yeah.
And the only way that's going to happen is open and honest dialogue. As I've said other times, what we're doing now is disclosure, and disclosure breeds disclosure. One story leads somebody to tell another story, and then there's a very open, a wide open dialogue. And every time that happens, the big white elephant in the room gets smaller and smaller. All the shit that nobody wants to talk about is not quite so fearful a topic anymore. And that is the goal of at least our podcast.
Yeah, everybody starts to drop their mask, and you realize there's no shortage of people that are broken, and parts of them are broken in one way or another.
Correct.
Definitely.
And Jason, I was so obviously where you work now, the people you work with are aware, of the issues you had, things you were dealing with, from your previous line of work. But when you first started working there again, or when you first started working there, did you feel like, oh man, now I got to go through this again, or when is it going to come up? When am I going to let people know that I deal with stuff, that I might be a little bit off sometimes? Did you find that kind of hard to go through at the new place?
Not on their part. They're one of the most generous, caring people. That's why I wanted to go work for them. When they interviewed me, I was like, I have to have this job. Like, it's an amazing job. It was more my own bullshit, I guess. The part of me that I still didn't want to expose. This was getting into this job was kind of my big moment to say it's time to be open. And if, it's okay to be vulnerable, like it's okay to show that side of your struggles that you had. But yeah, it was pretty nerve-wracking because I was like, I've never worked in a corporate job. I'm like, I don't know how they're going to view me, but for most of them, they understand. Everyone there understands some capacity of what first responders go through. And even in my interview, I told them like why I wanted to leave law enforcement, because of course I'm like, yeah, that's a normal question to ask someone, like, hey, why do you want to leave? But yeah, it was definitely a struggle, and I think really the podcast that we started actually gave me more of a chance to be a little more open about it and have a little bit more of a dialogue and be able to be open and honest with everyone.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing, isn't it? If you were to look back to that day that your wife first mentioned to you, hey, there's something going on with you. If somebody was to tell you right after that, like, oh, and you're going to be doing your own podcast talking about it to the world and talking to people you don't even know, like that whole idea is just like, oh my gosh. But I understand what you're coming from. And yeah, that's when you start working with new people who don't know, once you've taken that shield off once and let people see, you understand that, this is really the way I perceive everybody else seeing me. But it's still, there's a part of it that kind of grows back. It's like, okay, I got to do this again. Okay, here we go. You gotta let them see behind the mask. For the first time. But that's great that you're at a place where there's so many people who understand that and do well.
It's kind of crazy. Like, they've actually helped me through the process. I think just by who they are, by how supportive they are, that's helped me grow. Like, I always tell them, I said, you not only got me out of, like, a bad spot, but you also, like, gave my wife her husband back. Like, you helped my marriage. You helped my parents, who were, like, my son is not the same person. So I'm like, not only did you help me, but you helped, like, my entire family, because I actually was able to start being a little bit more of myself with them, and being able to be open and honest with them. So that, it was a huge step, but it was pretty cool to see how much it helped me heal and grow with myself, with my mental health.
Yeah, and it's amazing, because being able to, like, now myself, even with my kids who are some of them are still in their teens, but you realize that to be able, just in the moment, to be able to admit something out loud, even though it's not that big of a deal, it's, you don't even go in depth on it, but you realize the weight of it isn't with you, So it takes a lot longer to build up to something than it used to. And I don't think something that people don't realize, unless they've been on a podcast or have their own, there's a moment, even though that like when the three of us talked about doing this, without a doubt, I knew we wanted to do it. And I knew I wanted to do it. And I wasn't going to not do it. But in the back of my head, there's that part of me that was like, okay, from here on out, it's on the internet forever. And I know that there's going to be people who knew me before in different versions of me who are not going to agree, are going to think that I'm making something up. But when you talk to other people who are for the first time admitting it to themselves, it makes it all worth it. It's like, I've got these old friends. I've got people that have walked up to me and said, yeah, don't you think though this or this? I know that those relationships have changed forever, but I'm okay with it because the number of people that we talk to that you can see that they're saying something out loud for the first time, it's amazing. But I don't think the average person realizes that how you put yourself out there, and it's great that you guys are doing something like that for the first responder community, because that's definitely a selfless act. There's a cost to it, but it's well worth it. And you guys are awesome for doing that.
It's been Oh yeah, absolutely, Doc.
Let me just interject, and this is a common
Barry,
theme that we've run into. Every time you tell your story, it gets a little easier to tell. Number one, and number two, which means that you take power back from that story. The story no longer has as much power over you as it did when you first told it, and that means you're more at ease with yourself, and you just don't give a rat's ass what other people think. Because, in the end, every time you tell your story, you don't know who's in the audience, but there's a real pregnant chance you're helping somebody. Thank God.
Absolutely.
Jason, what I think is beautiful about what you said, and I truly have never, ever looked at it this way. I've looked at it as more of a selfish way, but how you said, you not only gave my life back, but you gave my wife her husband back. You gave my parents their child back, because it's true. You lose yourself in those moments of, I was an alcoholic for 14 years, and I'm so thankful that you were able to realize the road that you were going down, and were able to, I guess, maybe nip it in the butt a lot sooner than I was. But it's true, because your loved ones that have known you for so long, or like your spouse that grows with you, and you grow and mature together, when they lose you too. It's not just us that get lost, like they lose you, and I just wanted to say that was so beautiful what you said, because it's so true. To be able to hopefully inspire or help someone else give that gift to their family too is, such a refueling thing for me, as well as it sounds like for you too. So thank you for sharing.
Absolutely. I mean, I think everyone my wife was such a huge motivation in helping myself, and she's seen me at my worst, and she was one of the biggest driving factors of saying I gotta do something about this. And that's, I'm so thankful, and by the grace of God I was able to start becoming more of that husband again.
And I also think that's a testament to you and your wife's relationship and love, right? Because how much courage did it take for her to say, hey babe, something's going on, and then how much courage did it take for you to actually start processing that, unlike a lot of stubborn men, right? Like, how you gonna tell me what, like, you don't know what it's like, being in the military, being a law enforcement or whatever, but how much courage it took for you to be accepting of her. Would criticism be the right word?
I know the word you're looking for, yeah. Luis. That was the next word that was going to flow through my head too, but I know that's not what you meant, right? But
yeah,
for her to be able to say something to you about it, though.
Yeah, and you to process it in a healthy manner, and whether it took you a year or 2 or 3 years later, doesn't matter, but to process it, and so that's to me, like I said, that's a testament to your marriage or relationship.
No, she's definitely my rock. She that's the thing I love about her. I love that she will be honest with me, and even in those moments, I'm like, yeah, that must not have been a comfortable conversation, because I'm sure I didn't take it great. I'm sure I wasn't like, oh yeah, that sounds great. I know I have an issue. I was probably like, yeah.
What? No,
Right?
guys were never
we're
defensive.
We're never that way. I mean, no guy's ever been told by their wife, you're very defensive. When she told me that, I probably said, let me go get you some chocolates and flowers, because thank you for that.
Right?
Yeah, yeah, and we don't change the argument and make it about them or anything else.
deflect.
No.
Hey, Nate, Nate?
Not at all. Not at all. No.
Hey, Nate, what did you mean by that?
Yeah, yeah.
But anyway.
Say that again.
I said, hey, Nate, what did you mean by that? But anyway.
You're cutting out on my end, so
Okay.
I couldn't hear you.
I said, hey, Nate, what did you mean by that? Defensive. It was a joke on being defensive. Never mind.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Just so you know, Doctor, your video isn't showing on my end, so.
Oh, okay. Well, Luis just disappeared on my end.
Yeah.
I love technology. Jesus.
Say it again?
I said, Luis just disappeared on my... I can't see him. I can see Jason. I can see you. I can't see Luis. Now, he just reappeared. And I said, I just love technology, don't you?
Yep. Yeah, there's been gremlins in the internet all day for me, too, so...
Now, Phoenix, this was funny. Phoenix is still down here, so he's pressing buttons and...
Oh, okay.
He's 3, so if you lose me again, that's what's going on.
Cool, you got a great producer.
That's the thing. Hey, Jason, Phoenix is Luis's three-year-old son now. Also, he's also known as the Sergeant Major.
Okay.
And
Right.
in case you hadn't noticed, Jason, this very large dog kept jamming his nose into Nate's face a few minutes ago. That's the 200-pound Great Dane service dog. So that's
awesome.
what you're seeing and hearing in the background here.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah,
We like to
Go ahead.
keep it like
Yeah.
this is real life. You know what I mean? I don't have an hour, 2 hours out of my day to lock myself in a room and not give my child
exactly.
attention. You know, like I did that for 22 years in the military.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah,
and if someone's viewing our podcast and saying, "Oh, that's very unprofessional that a child walks in," then okay, go watch another podcast.
yeah, this is you don't come to the golden corral of podcasts and not realize this. We do this family style. So.
All you can eat buffet.
Yeah.
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 But it was funny that that was good timing on Doc Barry to mention the service dog, because my number one reservation, I didn't want a service dog. I was in my head, I was doing everything I could to try to come up with ways that I could work it around it, improve without it, because I knew that for me, that forever I would be walking around with a sign that says, "Hey, there's something wrong with this guy."
Yeah.
And that was a tough thing for me at first. And people have asked me before, "Well, what do you think about service dog?" And I'm like, take some time. I went for a year at the Pentagon working and thinking about everywhere I went. I'm like, what would I do in this situation? How would I do this? Would I be okay in this room when I walk in late and every single person looks at me? And it took me a lot of time to get over that. And now that everybody's gone and doesn't really talk to me anymore, I'm over it. But that's I don't think that's a thing that people have done because in a vindictive way. I think what happens is people don't know what to say, so they're quiet and they don't say anything, and they don't realize that everybody's doing the same thing and nobody's talking to you anymore. But, but yeah. No, the family style thing for sure is something that I don't think we're ever getting rid of.
Great. I love it.
Oh man. There was something else I was going to say, but I started cracking up when Doc Berry mentioned
Yeah,
it.
yes, it is. Yeah, I did too. There was something we were born with before the interruption, and I was like, oh crap.
Oh, might not have been the same thing, but I'm going to tell you something here, Jason, and I think Luis will probably tell me maybe something similar. But yeah, so your wife knew you before these things, right? And she knows the before experiencing trauma, Jason, and the after experiencing trauma, Jason, and she's there with you. Like, man, hold on to that woman for everything you can, because one of the things that I've learned is the second wife doesn't know you any other way, right? So my second wife only knew me as the guy with parts of 3 different puzzles jammed in together trying to make a pretty picture. And so her litmus of where I was off was actually the baseline, and that brings on a whole different set of struggles and issues. And the fact that you've got somebody who knows the real baseline, Jason, that this is what doing well Jason looks like, and then she sticks with you through this and is happy to to point it out to you to make you better so your lives can be better together. That's an amazing thing. I'm telling you, hold on, hold on to that woman with everything
Trust
you can.
Me, I wake up every single day, and there's not a day that goes by that I don't thank God for that woman, because we met right out of high school, so she has seen every single side of me. She's seen the vulnerable side, because for a long time she's the only one who saw that vulnerable side. And the time that it was the vulnerable side is when I was at my absolute worst, where I said, I don't have enough in me to put up this bullshit fence anymore. I'm letting it out. Like, my wife has seen me just completely break down. Yeah. So and thank God she wasn't like, oh, what the hell? Like, what the hell's wrong with him? Yeah. She always was me the first to literally just grab me. Because I just could not think of the words, and I have generalized anxiety as it is. So adding that onto it, she's like, oh, I know how to calm your anxiety down. She knows every single trigger. She knows when I'm starting to get uneasy, and she's like, boom, like that. She's like, come here, give me a hug. And she's like 5 foot nothing. Yep. She's like a short little Italian girl who's just, a spitfire, which I love about her, but she's like, come here, she knows, and that's what, has been just my rock, absolute rock.
Yeah, that's a war buddy right there, because when it made my hair raise when you're talking about it, because what I first recognized right away was once you started struggling with something, she was picking up the slack.
Right.
In the infantry, one of the things like the machine gunners will do is they'll have 3 separate machine guns that are working on a base of fire, and nobody fires really at the same time. Right, so one gun fires, and then there's a little bit of overlap. This one will fire, and then the one in the middle will fire, and then a different one will fire, and so it makes it hard to tell, where the attack is coming from. And you see a team that works really good when one of those guns goes down, and the other 2 pick up the pace, and you can't even tell that something happened. And that's what I was seeing in my head when you're talking about her saying, "Hey, what's going on with you?" And that's why I said she's your war buddy, man. She just picked it up. She knew something was short, and she picked it up with you, and she's helping you carry it. That's freaking awesome.
That literally just made my hair raise, because I couldn't think of a better way to put it, because I used to tell her, I'm like, marriage is, you're not everyone's going to be 50-50, but for years she was going 1,000%. She was the emotional support. She was there, even if she didn't exactly know what was going on. She's like, I know something is, but I'm still going to be there. And that's that's why when you said war buddy, just like in the academy, you have your battle buddy. When you get pepper sprayed, you get CS gassed. You have your buddy who can also be like, you got this, man. But then you also have a buddy that can laugh it off with you and feel like you looked like such a dumbass when you got pepper sprayed.
All the stuff.
CS gassed the first time. I wasn't in the military, so I'm like, I don't know what the hell CS gas is going to be. It looks like it kind of sucks. and we ended up getting pepper sprayed and CS gassed the same week. Well, they didn't tell didn't tell us because they're like, we didn't want to freak you guys out, like you overpsych yourself. So they like, and that's what your battle buddy did. Like they're like, you got this. Put your arms up over your head, and you're just coughing. You're like, I'm gonna die, and it's snot's running down, and they're like, oh, let me get that for you. But like that's that's why like I cling to that woman, because like she's there for those moments where I'm like, I can't breathe. I'm like just losing my shit right now. So.
Yeah.
CS.
Doc Berry.
First of all, CS stands for copious snot, just in case anybody was wondering.
I've never heard of that.
I hadn't even heard it either.
Me neither.
I just made it.
We used to just call it clearing the sinuses. CS gas, clearing the sinuses gas.
Yeah,
I just made it up.
but that is.
But that's the first. We can even have laughs here too. Oh my God, that's terrible. That's unprofessional on a podcast. But the other thing is, tell the missus that Doc and Grunt say hello and thanks for loaning you out for the evening. And the other thing is I'm noticing too. Just doing my job here. As you get further into some of these responses, I can see your voice I can hear your voice wavering a bit as you talk. And I'm like, oh man, he's trying real hard. Thanks for doing this with us.
Absolutely. I can't thank you guys enough. Yeah. Just like what you guys are doing to raise awareness. I mean, I have the utmost respect for all of you guys for what you do and what the stuff you've seen and gone through. So thank you guys too, because not only does it raise awareness, it helps people just like me, just coming on here and shooting the shit with you guys and just being honest. That was, one of the most therapeutic things you can do. So thank you guys.
Yeah. And it's therapeutic.
Yeah, we appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, I think that's like you had touched it a little bit on it before, Jason, earlier about when I asked you about what you're doing now, and you were describing about what you do with your work with your podcast. We say it all the time. Is every time we get on here, it's a therapy session, right? It's a free therapy session. It's like I got sober. I started my sobriety through AA, so it's kind of like in AA meetings. They say, "What does it take to have an AA meeting?" 2 drunks, right? It's like here. What does it take to have a round table of people trying to heal each other? It just takes 2 of us to talk, and eventually people end up talking.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
2 people in their trauma.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. And it's another thing that you and I went like this when you said it, because when you said my wife just knows when to touch me. Yeah, I don't know how many times we might be in public, we might be doing something, and yeah, my wife, her name is Christina, like she just knows it, and she'll like grab me like this, or she'll just grab my hand, or she'll put her hand on my back, and it reminds me to take that deep breath and recenter myself, recompose myself, kind of, for lack of a better term, reassess the situation, and realize that there's really not a threat right now. And it's amazing that intuition that our spouses can have, right? Or our loved ones can have, and how much they can help us in those moments.
Absolutely.
Yeah, silent cue. Yeah. Right, and I don't know if you've mentioned this. Do you have kids, Jason?
It's just me, my wife, and our 2 dogs. So we have our 2 spoiled dogs. Very spoiled.
I'd only ask because I was remembering, like what Luis was talking about. I was like, oh yeah, I think I can remember some of that, because I've been single now for coming up on 5 years, but being open about it with kids has been a learning process, because you got to approach it slightly different. But my second to youngest daughter, who's, on the 15th, she's going to be 18. She's really good at, saying something to me. She knows when to find like kind of the lull in my chaos to say, Daddy, you've been having issues lately, or, or you seem like you're kind of stressed out. And it's awesome when family can recognize that in you, and they feel safe about saying something about it too.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that some other people that we have yet to meet will watch this and see this, you talking about it and Doc Fonseca talking about it, and realizing, how that would help in their own lives and
Yeah.
where that would relieve some stress. Because I know that for me, before I could, and I imagine you guys say the same thing, I could look back to where I didn't have that, and I easily went off the handle, or it turned into road rage, or it's amazing that for
Yeah.
me, that I'm not in jail.
Yeah.
And
Like you said, I mean,
that's
having your
Go ahead.
family, no matter who it is, like for me, like also going to my dad was a hard thing, because like my dad's like one of my best friends, so like going to him and explaining this thing was not easy. But having those open conversations with him and be like, yeah, I'm not doing good. Like I'm really struggling, because I'm like, you don't want to let your parents down, you don't want to let your spouse down, but having that support that they're like, it's okay to be vulnerable, and it's okay to talk about it, and let's figure this out. And that's always my big thing. I mean, our whole family is very close, and it's like, let's be open about this.
Yeah, that's definitely great. You're on mute, Doc Barry.
Jason, is Dad also in law enforcement?
No, I was the first one in my family to go into law enforcement.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm asking is, when I did the old chief video, not the podcast with you guys, but I did a video for Colony EMS. I was invited over there to talk about PTSD, and what I did was, as you know, I don't do routine psychological briefings because that just puts people to sleep. So what I did was I took every symptom of post-traumatic stress disorder and I turned it into a story. And the artificial construct that I used for that story is either the old chief or the old vet. And it doesn't have to be a chief. It can be a black hat. It can be a lieutenant. It can be a captain. It could be somebody with 5 years in or 50 years in. I just use it as a term, a construct of convenience. Anyway, when I did that video, it's gone viral around here, and I think I've sent it to you too. And if I haven't, I will. Similar to the podcast, the folks who have listened to it have had their families, up to and including their own fathers who are in law enforcement, listening to it, and they all tell me the same thing. What Doc Barry does here is he tells my story in words that I can't bring myself to say, so that it makes much more sense to those around them. And when I do the old chief presentation live, I get a lot more animated, kind of like what you saw on the podcast. And I've done it like in three different locations recently, and I get at least half of them in tears. And I ask, why the tears? And they say, because it's the first time we feel understood accurately, and you're holding a mirror up to us, and we can't deny now that there's a problem. And that starts a discussion, and another discussion, and another discussion.
Yeah, it's easier to relate to a story than a label, isn't it?
Damn Skippy. Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And nobody wants to go, oh yeah, I'll take that. That's me. I'll take that label. But
Yeah.
when you hear somebody say something, and you can empathize with it and relate to it.
Right.
And I guess, I don't know, is that, Doc, is that really the basis of the interpersonal approach?
Oh, you could say that, yeah. And when they've watched the podcast, I get emails from people and calls afterward. Hey, Doc, you don't know who I am, but I saw you present, and you just described me. You've never met me before. You don't know who I am, and yet somehow you described me top to bottom. And I say, good. Let's have another conversation about that. And the more we get people talking, the numbers, I believe, will go down, because these suicides are needless. They don't have to happen to begin with. And the reason why I say that is when they can finally open their mouths and let the pain out, the tension out, the whole damn thing, then thinking can actually take place and healing can begin.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, Jason, you touched something about family a little bit earlier and how they are great, and you said something, and whoever you decide to call family, right? And I'm a big firm believer in that. I mean, I have my blood family, but then I have my family that I've just have formed a bond with over the years, maybe over an event, right? Um, but I was laughing to myself internally when you said that because I recently came back from Virginia. I think it was about a month ago now, maybe a month and a half ago. And I went there to go see one of my really good friends retire from the Navy. She put in 26 years. Yes, 26 years in the Navy. Retired as an E7, so she retired at a really high rank for an enlisted person. And while we were there, a bunch of us that I'm sorry, it looked like I was frozen for a minute. A bunch of us that started our Navy career together, were part of that group. And so we're all talking. It was roughly like 7, 8 of us that I consider family from back in that day. And one of them straight up asked us, and they call me Chico. That's how long they've known me. They're like, Chico, how come you never came to us with what's going on with you? And I straight up told them, I said, because you guys are family. And I said, and I was ashamed of my actions. I was living in shame of who I was, of what I was doing. And I said, the last people I ever wanted to ever disappoint is my family. I said, so it's easier for me to go to other leadership than you guys. And one of them, her name is Rosalind, she looked at me square in the eye, she goes, but Chico, exactly, you said it, we're family. Why would we ever judge you? And it was such a healing. Sorry about that. It was such a healing and such a, like closure for me that I was like, absolutely, why didn't I go to them for 14 years? For 14 years. And unfortunately, they were stationed on the East Coast and I was stationed on the West Coast. So it was easy for me to hide a lot of that bad behavior, a lot of that stuff from them. But now that I look back, it's like, absolutely, why did I, for 14 years, never say, hey, family, I need help. I'm hurting here and I'm at the end of my rope. So you're absolutely right. Family, regardless of whether they're blood or you become family just out of love, right? They're such an amazing part of our growth and our development. So I just wanted to say a little
Yeah,
bit.
no, you're absolutely right.
No, yeah, Jason, it's so amazing that, your wife was there to point it out to you so early, because it when there isn't someone to do that, and I think, Luis, maybe you did some of this too. Looking back, it's easy to go, man, I should have done this. There were all these people that I worked with all the time that I know they would have helped me. But when you're in the middle of it, if nobody else sees it, it's like there's the denial part of you, where you're sure you're okay, and then once you realize something's wrong and it just grows into this big thing, you're like, how do I light the fuse on this thing without blowing everything up,
Right.
And I'm it's a blessing that it didn't get to that point in your life. It sounds like that, attention was brought to it before it just grew that huge. Not to say that living with it isn't just as tough, if not tougher, but to one less thing to deal with. That's for sure. It's a blessing.
I mean, that's exactly what happened. Is it was starting to mount up. It was starting to build up like a volcano almost, and I think that's kind of where my wife looked at it and said, it's almost like Mount Vesuvius. You're starting to see it get higher and higher, and then it's like, okay, let's try to stop it before it hits that peak. And there were small eruptions and just small stuff that I mean, I always just say like it's amazing that having that, and just like you were saying, Luis, is with your family. When you were talking about that, I was just thinking about part of the reason why I didn't go to my family really and didn't want to go to my wife is because I always thought I'm their son, I'm her husband. I hold myself to a higher standard. I hold myself to a higher standard. Even my best friends in law enforcement, I'm like, I don't want you to see me like this because you should expect more of me. And that's like, for me, that's how I felt. I was like, I don't want to be a disappointment to you. I don't want you to think like, oh, how am I going to go to you and say I'm like polishing off a bottle quicker than I can buy one. How I'm like, that's not a fun conversation to have. And like, hey, I can barely even function right now, and like I literally don't even want to get out of bed. All I want to do is literally just lay in the dark and just literally just drift off into the abyss, because that's what I felt like. But for like family, that's what I felt like. I was like, I don't want to let them down. I was like, I don't want them to see me that way, because it's not a fun side to, and it's not fun to hear either. Like, hey, by the way, I have a terrible drinking problem, and I don't know how to cope with it. Merry Christmas, by the way. Like, it's like, how am I supposed to explain that? And that's kind of where, for me, it's even now out of law enforcement, is understanding those triggers. Just like drinking, just still working through that, of saying, I know the things that I really need to avoid more of. So, but yeah, I totally understand that with, where they may think, hey, why didn't you come to us sooner?
Yeah.
It's family doesn't realize when they tell you they're proud of you. They don't realize how big that is and what it means to you and how it affects your relationship in a good way, right? But, they were proud, I'm sure, when you told them what you wanted to do, and they were proud when you graduated, and they were proud when you went out on your first call, And then on you, I would imagine it makes it that much harder to bring something to them that isn't a, hey, look at this great thing that happened. Just like you said, it's like, here's all the fodder that comes along with this.
It's like when you get your badge pinned on, that's one of the proudest moments you have, but it's also one of the heaviest moments, because you're like, things are going to change now. But then you think back of like, my wife pinned my badge on for both departments, and I always thought back, I was like, man, I always wish, it's like she didn't know back then, like, hey, from the minute I pinned this badge on, things are going to be different now. And that was the hard part to accept and to think back on, for sure.
Oh, yeah. Doc Barry said something to me a long time ago. I think it was the first time we met in person back in Washington, D.C. And I was talking about drinking and some other things. And, he said to me, he's like, well, the addiction is an addiction from something. And nobody had ever said that to me before. I'd never considered that, you're running to the bottle to get away from something else. And one of the things that's helped me do now is I realize that, I quit cold turkey a long time ago. But I know my personality type. I don't know if it was always that way, but it's for sure that way now. I know to watch myself now. Like, when my kids play video games, and especially when they play, my youngest, he plays some of the combat type games, and I can watch him play it forever. And he's like, Dad, I know you'll have fun. You want to play this. And I'm like, I know, me too. I'm like, and that's why I can't, because I know that I will let other things suffer so I can run to that thing,
Oh, yeah.
And that's something that I think that sometimes some people, when they give up drinking, they don't realize that they don't know to look for, hey, but something else might pop up. There's going to be another addiction possibly coming up, and look out for it, And, I'm not sure why, what made me think of that at the time when you were talking about the drinking, but I just remember Doc Berrien mentioned that to me, and I like to use that lesson to help other people that are still, having trouble drinking. And, I'll tell them, like, hey, the drinking is to celebrate something great to happen not
Yeah.
to make something great happen.
That's a great
you
point.
know?
Well,
Well,
yeah, it is, and you know, like you said, just because you stop drinking doesn't mean that you automatically stop being an asshole. First and foremost, right?
That's a good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
and then,
coming from a man who knows.
Yeah, and then secondly, yeah, you're absolutely right. That's why and we talk a lot about de-glamorizing negative coping mechanisms, because you can turn gambling into a negative thing. Sex, eating. There's people that pick at their skin out of anxiety, and to point they leave scars on themselves. That could be a negative thing, right? So you're absolutely right. We have. I always have to remind myself. I have to talk about me personally. I can't put it on everyone, but I personally am one of those people that whatever can take away the pain or fill in that void, I will grab onto it. It could be a chapstick. I always use this example. I don't know why the whole chapstick example, but if a piece of chapstick came and they sold it and it gave me this happiness or pleasure that takes the pain away, I'd go buy boxes and boxes of it, but it's an addiction, right? It'd be an addiction because I'm using it to take away the pain, right? To take away that void, that whatever it is. Go
Let
ahead.
me just jump in here first thing, that's enough of your lip. Anyhow, sorry, I couldn't resist. I do some of these just for me, sick bastard that I am. All right, but some of my colleagues may disagree with what I'm about to say, and that's fine. And some of you may disagree. I don't believe, and this is what I was telling Nate, I'll expand on it a little. I don't believe that people have drug problems or alcohol problems. I don't. I really don't. I do, on the other hand, believe that they have emotional problems, and they use drugs, alcohol, or whatever to escape or to not deal with those emotional problems. That's the first thing. The second thing is there's the guy or gal who goes out for an occasional weekend excursion to feel no pain every once in a while. And then there's addiction. And the addict no longer uses the substance, whatever it may be, in order to feel good. The addict instead uses the substance in order to avoid feeling bad.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the intent.
Do with
of the
that what
use.
you will. Yep.
Yeah, that's what my psych doc, and so I haven't mentioned it on this podcast, but I have mentioned it on my own private one, personal one. I'm very open and honest with my mental health care providers because I do use medicinal marijuana. But I'm very open with my providers about it because of that reason. Because even though, I'm a proponent of it, I'm an advocate for it, I also know, like I said, anything that brings me pleasure or takes away the pain, I can become addicted to it. Just the same as with the Zoloft, with the Xanax, with the, benzos, right, that they can prescribe me, right? I can get addicted just to those just as well. So it's something that I'm very open and honest with my healthcare providers because I want them, and I also want my wife to be able to be like, hey, Louis, something's going on. The intent of you using either marijuana or like right now I'm prescribed Zoloft and Xanax. Now your intent isn't just to be at a normal playing field. Now your intent is you're wanting to just get high now, Louise. And it's like, okay, yeah, you're right. And that is something I always have to be very honest with myself about too, because I personally feel I have an addictive personality. Like I gravitate to anything that brings me joy. So that's it.
Yeah, I'm thinking about what Doc Barry was saying. I'm thinking in my head. I keep repeating to myself. I guess so I won't forget it. Right? I'm just thinking to myself. Okay, avoidance correlates to addiction, or addiction correlates to avoidance. But somehow there's that connection there. And yeah, I mean, who hasn't seen somebody who who's dealing with stuff who maybe it's exercise, right?
Hmm.
But then you see that it's gone way beyond the
Yes.
point of just being fit, you
Right.
know, or they collect something. But man, now everything that they've got goes towards that collection, you know.
Hmm.
They're and I don't know if that's the same as control or not, but I can definitely see there's an avoidance there, right? Because it becomes the only thing in their life.
Well, what they're going to
Yeah.
do, is to try to capture the intensity of the original high. Now, by this I mean, and this riffs off a discussion that I've had with both of you guys, and Luis most recently. Um, let me start with a nice nasty example, just to get the discussion off the ground. It's kind of like when we experience the very first time when playing with Mr. Happy to the point at which he vomits. Our first ejaculation. By God, we remember that experience, that initial tear, that oh my holy Jesus, Mother of God moment. And when we are, in our early teens or whenever when this occurrence happens for the first time, what's the first thing we're going to do, especially as dumb little boys? We want to make it happen again real quick. And it hurts like hell because we don't know how this newly found appliance actually works. And we want it again and again and again and again. But the thing is, and I'm only being half gross and disgusting when I come up with this example, because no matter how many times we do it afterward, it never captures the very first one. And what I was saying a few minutes ago about having this discussion with you guys in the past, most notably, Luis, remember, you and I were speaking about this in private. And it's from if anybody doesn't know, it's from a song that Rod Stewart did in the 70s, and the title of it is "The First Cut Is Always the Deepest."
Oh yeah.
Remember that discussion?
Yep.
And that goes for not just things that hurt like hell, but things that create euphoria. And that's why we want to recapture that original high, okay? But we never can because we now have a basis for comparison. We now have a baseline.
Right.
So we wind up chasing that original high and taking more and more and more of whatever the substance is, or more and more of the nookie, or more and more of the booze to get ourselves to that same level. And it is
Right.
an exercise in abject futility.
It starts to become your currency.
You betcha.
Yeah, makes sense. Now that we're talking about family and how, great and wonderful they are as a support system, does anyone else here, because I'll be honest, sometimes feel like they're always being watched, or, they're under a microscope or a magnifying glass, and it's like, hey, I'm okay right now. Just leave me alone. Like, does that ever happen to anyone else?
Yeah. Yeah, and you never really know. Is it you being overly defensive,
Yeah.
or is it them
Yes.
being are they scrutinizing too much, right?
Well,
Yeah.
and it's
Oh,
especially hard too because it's
Well-
like you said. It's how do you sometimes saying I just want to be like just want to get away. Like my time sometimes just driving to the gas station in my truck is sometimes such a peaceful time because I'm like I love music. Like I'm very into music. I converted like my garage into like a man cave. So like I have my vinyls in there. I have
Nice.
a TV. Like I love it. And sometimes I'm like, I just gotta escape. Like it's nothing you guys did, but I'm like, I just
Right.
gotta get out there, And yeah, it's sometimes hard just to explain.
It is. It is.
Well,
Because we all need our alone
There-
time. You know what I mean? Like our time where we just need that time. As much as we love our spouses and our children, because even our children and our spouses need their time away from us too, especially when our asshole is at a level 9. You know what I mean? So, but it's hard. because I find myself sometimes, like Nate said, I question, am I just being overly defensive? Am I being, for another lack of a better term, am I being overly sensitive? You know what I mean? Like, um, is is there something really going on with me? That's why I'm like, no, just leave me alone, right? Or is it me just like, really, no, I'm just fine. I just want my space. It's an ever ending battle in my mind of which one is it, which one is not, and it's kind of like a double-edged sword, right? It's regardless on how I fall on it, I'm still gonna cut myself and hurt myself.
Well, what
Yeah.
they may be worried about, not just in your case, Luis, but anybody, any of us, is that they've seen you escalate or go into a very dark place that was terrifying, okay? And they don't want to see you go to that same place again. And they're doing everything in their power to make sure that you don't, because they know what you can become when things get
Yeah.
bad enough. That's
Yeah.
part of it. The other thing
And
is, I'll
go
tell you,
ahead.
as far as family goes, again, as Luis often says, speaking only for myself, it occurred to me that there were two groups of people in my life. Blood family, which for me, mom, dad, both sets of grandparents, and my uncles, the people who raised me, in other words. And I don't have any siblings. And my blood family is all dead. Okay, my mom actually was my uncle, but I hardly ever saw him. They were the last ones. And I remember feeling very alone on the last day, like I'm completely an orphan. But as a bunch of people, mostly Marines, reminded me rather loudly, "You're not alone, Doc. You have brothers and sisters all over the world." And that's true. But it dawned on me one day that if I were to separate the people in my life, blood family as I talk about them, and all my friends as well as all the vets and first responders I have been privileged to know, that's in group number 2. Between group number 1, blood family, group number 2, I asked myself, with which group can I just totally be myself? And the answer to that question is group number 2, any day of the week and twice on Tuesdays. It's a hell of a thing when you realize that with blood family, occasionally you just plain cannot just totally be yourself for fear of judgment, going down old emotional rabbit trails that you're trying to escape from. But that's the way it is.
Yeah, and it's hard to, that if you're going to bring some of it up, like, how do you catch them up on everything that's happened that they're not even aware of? It's like, in the moment that something's bad or you need to talk to somebody, you don't want to have to do a whole background dissertation on it, There's those people that you can just say, dude, just want to let you know I'm struggling, so if you see something, freaking, hit me in the back of the head. It's
Yeah.
You don't have to say much more than that, and they get it.
Yeah, but devil's advocate, I guess, maybe. For me, it was opposite. I didn't want work to know, like, those deep, dark secrets, especially the drug use, because obviously in the military we're not supposed to use drugs at all, right?
And early in your career.
Yeah, right. But my family, and when I talk about my family, I'm talking the same thing. My parents, my sister, all my cousins, and I think on one side of the family, I have 37 cousins alone. So we're a big family. We're a big stereotypical big family. But I would go on leave to El Paso, Texas, to visit my family, my grandparents when they were still around, my aunts and uncles. But then it was also because I would go out with my cousins, and I don't want to share their story. But like I said, I have a lot of cousins, so you'll never guess which ones it is. But I have my cousins that I would go out and get drunk and get high with, you know. And when I'm talking about getting high, I'm talking about snorting coke, shooting heroin, um, you know. So some big heavy hitter drugs, right? Um, where that was my escape. Like for me, that's where I felt I could be the real Luis Fonseca, because the real Luis Fonseca is a piece of shit that's not worth anything. That all I'm worth is being a drunk, having a needle in my arm, snorting shit up my nose. You know, like that's all I'm worthy of. And so when I would put the uniform back on, that was all just a pretend act, and I didn't want the audience, which was the rest of the military, you guys, to see that I was anything less than who I perceived the Navy wanted me to be, which was this. And Jason, I don't know if you how much of my story you know, but being this big war hero, right? Like, I didn't want that impression to go away. But with my family, I didn't need to pretend. Like, we were all drunks and drug addicts, you know, together. And now that a lot of us have gone sober and cleaned up our life, our cousins that are still involved in that, like, we don't judge them. We still but our relationships definitely have changed a lot, you know. I don't look at going to El Paso, Texas anymore out of a sense of escaping from the world. Now it's like I'm going to Texas to visit my mom now, and I'll hang out with my cousins that don't use or drink that much anymore, but the ones that do, it's like, hey, I'm here. Nice to see you guys again. And, you know, I know what they're doing, but I have to stay away from them because the old Luis will come out, and that's never a good thing.
Yeah, Luis, I feel for you, man. And I don't want to, I don't mean it to sound condescending,
No,
but I mean,
I know you don't.
like you've got a unique, a more unique situation, I think, than most people, and like, I can't imagine, and I don't know for Jason how known you are in your community, but that's definitely when you mention that, like I see what you're saying. Your family knows you before, the big event,
Right.
and the public persona of you. I can't imagine having that pressure on me. Where like if I walk into a room in uniform, either people know who I am, or they're going to go online after I walk out and go, "What was that ribbon that he had? What did he do? Oh my gosh!" Right? So you have that following you around, and I can see definitely where your family is an escape because they know you beforehand. They know the quote unquote real you. That's it's funny because there's so many ways all of us have to deal with it, unique to our situations, and it made me think too about Jason in your case. You mentioned your wife, helping you along with that, but how does your family? I guess not that I would think that they would, respond in a bad way, but are they also a part of it? Or are they kind of like, okay, well, we know Jason's got this thing, and do they tend to not talk about it, or are they comfortable
they're
talking
very
about
open.
it with you?
My parents are huge proponents of calling me out in a good way, I guess. Because I see both sides. Because I had really good friends that I could totally, like you said, Luis, like you can, like, me, and like the minute my first day's off, I'm getting drunk, like I'm hitting it hard, and I can't wait. It's like that. I mean, that's there are people that know you that way. And then I think too, in my opinion, it depends who the family you have. Your family could cause way more issues, just like you said, Luis, that it could cause a whole lot of issues. Parts of my family are not people that I would ever share that with. And they're not influences that I would trust with that part of my life, because I'm like, that could easily be manipulated. But yeah, to answer your question, Nate, like my family was very involved in that, in kind of that step, in kind of like talking me through it, and they knew like, I had generalized anxiety since I was a kid, and obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD. So like they knew all like the weird shit I used to do, touching things like a certain amount of times and locking them. Like they knew that, so they knew a part of Jason that most people didn't know. Some of even my closest friends didn't know. I'd say the only person really outside my family that knew that right off the bat was my wife. When we first met, I said, "This is who I am. Like, this is. I have some issues. Take it for what you want. And I told her, if you don't, I wouldn't blame you if you did not want to be in a relationship. And as much of a godsend as she is, she's like, yeah, okay, well, we move on from that. But like I said, I think it depends. Yeah, I think it depends the family you have. I think if I've met a lot of people who's like, oh, absolutely.
And what they went through.
That's kind of what the healing process is like. My parents could see that different side now that I got out, and like that they were able to come together and talk to me as a family and like say, hey, it's because we love you. And that's why, like, there's, like I said, there's definitely people in my family that I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't trust with any ounce of me to tell them any personal thing. Like you said, Luis, like there's, like you said, cousins you have, and that's how it is on some family that I have, but I wouldn't even like I call them family, but they're not people that actually know me. They may say we may have the same last name, but you guys really don't know what I am. Only a select, very tight-knit group of people know me for me, because I was also very careful of like, who am I going to let into this circle? I always think of like Meet the Parents, when Robert De Niro's like the circle of trust. like that's like I like we're very like our family. Like, my dad lives out in Tennessee, so, like, we FaceTime every single day. We talk about all kinds of different things, and I could call him and say, like, and this happened a couple of weeks ago, I wasn't doing too well. Like, my anxiety was really triggered. I started to drink a little more again, and he's like, well, like, what's going on? And it was like an hour and a half later, I was on the phone with him, and we were just talking through it, but that's because that's who are the people in my circle. People that I can call the 2 a.m. phone calls to say, I'm really screwing up right now and I really need to talk to you. So yeah, I mean, thankfully they were a huge part of that, and they weren't like, dumbfounded. I think they knew something was going on.
Right.
Yeah. Do you live far from your, I would say, core family, not like household, but core family, the people who know you the best? Do you live far away from them?
My mom lives it's funny. So before my dad moved to Tennessee, he lived 10 minutes north of me. My mom lives 10 minutes south. My mother-in-law lives like 10 minutes east of us, and then my father-in-law lives like 15 minutes south. So like we were like, it is. I mean, people are like, "Man, you like that's kind of crazy." I'm like, "No." I was like, "We see each other constantly. Like, those are those are the people that I love the most." So, like, we all lived in like this tiny little radius that everyone's like, I'm going over to my dad's house all the time. I'm like, "Hey, by the way, I'm on my way to come say hi." My mom would pop by. Like, that's just kind of how we are. And then my dad, he moved to Tennessee. I helped him move out there in June. So now he's like, 1,000 miles away. So that's been definitely a bit of a challenge kind of navigating that. But yeah, he's the one that lives the furthest away now.
That's kind of funny. You made me think about my own situation, and I was you're talking about everybody basically lives in every direction away from you. And I've been lamenting lately about how my kids, when they get old enough to move out, they all take off and run in different directions. So it depends on your perspective, right? I'm like some people might tell me like, "Oh, that's awesome, you live like equidistant and close to all your kids." And I'm like, I kind of look at it as like they're all running away from
me.
Exactly.
Yeah, they may leave the nest, but it's like me and my wife, we wanted to stay close to the family. Like, we really wanted to stay, because that keeps us grounded. Like, we have. Like, that's something that we're very big into. Like, we want to be near our family. We want to be able to support each other. If something happens, it's like, boom, so yeah, that's kind of the funny thing, because people always would tease me. They're like, you really live like that close? I'm like, oh hell yeah. I'm like, it's awesome. Like, my mom like makes cookies, and like she's like, hey, I'm dropping some off now. She's like, I'm outside your door. So
Right.
Yeah, that is my only regret about serving in the military. Not that I don't have that, because I had it up until I was 18. My regret is that my kids never got that.
Yes.
They never knew what it was like to grow up with grandparents, all their cousins, living so close together. And now, and that's the reason why when I retired, I stayed in Virginia. I'm like, oh, this is home to them, so I've got to stay here. And I'm hoping to see them get to do that with their kids. But yeah, it's I think it's amazing, that you've got that.
Yeah.
You've got family so close, and you've got those you trust nearby you, because I guess it doesn't really matter whether it's people you work with or family. It all comes out to, there's definitely people you don't tell things about, and other people you can, regardless of whether they're family or work people.
I mean, it's funny. I have one of my best friends. He lives like another 20 minutes east of me, so it's like I'm like surrounded. So I'm like, my bullshit can't go that far, because I have a whole surrounding of family and friends that are like, nope, we're calling you out on that.
To call you out on it. Yeah.
That's something that I love the way you said that. Your bullshit can't go far. I always used to say that when you live close to family, there's always people holding you accountable.
Yeah,
but I like the way you said it better.
That's the way I look at him. Like, that's my bullshit.
Right.
Because I've always wondered about military divorces. I've always wondered about them. Like, how much of it is it because the military life is hard? How much of it is there because there's nobody there to call you out on your bullshit? And it's when you're talking about old friends and stuff like that, it's kind of funny how there's people in your life. Like, I've got a cousin. He's not a blood cousin, but I've always called him my cousin because I've known him. His mom and my mom knew each other before we were born. And they're both immigrants from Thailand, and that guy today, I can go a year without talking to him, and then he'll call me up. The next thing you know, we'll talk for 6 hours, and he's one of those guys where he'll call me up and he'll just start telling me about all the shit that he's been through, and he's one of those people. And I know, Luis, you've got these people in your family too. I'm listening to the way you talk about them. If he said tomorrow, if he told me some shit that was happening, I would go stack bodies with him in a heartbeat. Nothing to even do about combat. That guy had something going on. Without even a thought, I'd be there to help him out with it. And having those people that you can admit those things to and talk with, and and if you're getting too touchy about it, they'll be like, man, shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Like, let's go do this. And you're not gonna, and you don't get butthurt about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
They snap you right out of it.
It's funny that you talk about, kind of like your ride or die homies, right? It reminded me of that quote, and I forgot what movie it's in. Ben Affleck says it I forgot the other actor's name, but he walks in a room and goes, hey, I need you to go do some real bad shit. You can't ask what we're doing. You can't ask where we're going. You can't blah, blah, blah. And the other actor looks at him and goes, okay, I just want to know which car are we taking.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. I got friends and family that literally can call me up, and my wife knows it, that I will go stand trial in front of 12 people, for them, it'd be like, hey, I got something in the trunk of the car, I need you to help me dig a hole, but don't ask questions. Okay, what hole?
Yeah. Just, do I need to bring a shovel, or do you already have one?
Right. Jason, but it is.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, those family members are the same way. The closest people you had to you, when you went through some of that kind of trauma stuff. I'm sure for Jason, some of the people that that experienced some of the same stuff that you did, right? It's those people being that close, you got to have them, and it's tough when you don't have them around you.
That's something I've been especially in like the podcast. One podcast we really want to do is about spouses and just about just the toll it takes on them, and just because I mean, I give my family credit. I'm like, I'm not easy to deal with, and I'm not gonna bullshit and say I'm a bed of roses. No, I have a lot of issues, and I got shit that I still got to work on, and it's just a continuous trying to improve myself. But man, the fact that they still love me after this long, it says something, and they will still call me,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something, and I hope you can do this, because I think I don't know how long it'll take us to get into the right people to do it, but my daughter, it's about to turn 18. She asks me at least once a month, like, Dad, when are you guys going to do the one where you bring children on, the children of people with PTSD, to talk about it? And when she first brought it up to me, I was kind of like, everybody, has heard from spouses and stuff, and I started thinking, I was like, you know what, but the kids, they've got it in a whole different way. Because they can't call you out on your bullshit, in the middle of it, because you pull that, it's easy to pull the dad card, right? Or just get away from me. And what are they going to do about it, And she's never shared, what it's like with me, but she wants to share it with the world. And as much as I'm scared to hear it, I want to hear it. I can't wait till we can do something like that and have some other.
A No Shame Warrior podcast.
I would
because we have a Teens Talk edition where we actually talk about that, because obviously all my kids had to suffer with me, right? And Jason, my family's very open. My daughter's 15, and unfortunately, what is it now, guys? About 4 months now, I would say. She attempted suicide.
Yeah.
And so that's her seeing me open about, because I attempted suicide in 2018, so her seeing me go on this journey has given her the strength, and she's like, yes, I have attempted suicide, yes, I this and that, and it's helped her open up some more, where she actually came up with the idea. She was like, hey Dad, can we do a Teens Talk? And I said, absolutely. The only thing is with the Teens Talk is I have to get parental consent, and so I have forms and everything for all that too.
I think that's incredible.
But yeah, it's a very
she would do it.
It's a very unique, because you said it's absolutely right. It's because I'm the parent and I said so. You do not question me. Why are you arguing with me?
Yeah.
No, it's no and it's no. And when I look back at some of the things that I said no about, it's like, why would I tell my kids no to go play outside just because I'm having a shitty day?
Making my hair raise up, man. It's those times that you remember that you said something stupid, or mean, and it hurt them, and you can, like, sometimes I see her face get a certain way, and I'm like, no, not again. I can't believe I'm doing it again, and I hear you, man. It's and they don't have a choice, and they get affected by it.
Imagine how many times our kids, and Jason, you're not in the situation right now, but if you and your wife ever do decide to have kids or whatnot, it's such a disappointment. It's that cycle all over again, right? It's and your kids know, and they always wonder, why does Mom or Dad dislike me so much? What did I do to cause them to not like me? They should love me. They're my parents. And I'm telling you guys, this Teens Talk gets, like, it can get really real, and it has taken me a step back. Like, I haven't posted them up yet. I've done 2 of them because
I was going to ask you.
It is just so real, and I can't even come to edit the videos because I start breaking down, because I see so many of my failures, so many of 19-year-old, 20-year-old Luis that made all these mistakes that have caused what I think in my mind, that ripple effect, right? And now has led my kids to as well be, have self-doubt issues, have self-esteem issues, have anxiety, have depression, and now I see where I've interjected that so much into them, right? And a matter of fact, with my 27-year-old, I was having a discussion with him yesterday coming home from school, And it was exactly about this. And he said, Dad, he goes, you know what? He goes, I've come to the realization that I cannot hold a grudge against you because you were only 18. You didn't know what
Oh,
you
man.
were doing. He goes, because my 27-year-old has two daughters, so he blessed me being a grandfather a couple years, 2 years ago. He goes, and he goes, I see how difficult it is to be a parent. He goes, so that's why I don't hold grudges with you. That's why I call you all the time now. And I started crying. I said, you don't understand how much closure you just brought to me today. You don't understand where, you know, because we openly have said, you know, we are learning at him at 27, me at 42, are really just learning how to be father and son, you know? And it was a shame because drugs and alcohol stood in the way of that. No, let me take that back. My inability to speak up about my mental health stood in the way of that for so many years.
Yeah, that's. Yeah, we have a tendency to only see our parents as parents, right? I mean, it's hard to see them as people who had to make decisions and make bad decisions, and it took me a long time looking at my own father, looking back, and I do the math in my head. I'm like, shit, he was in his 20s, and I'm like, I didn't have my shit together in my 30s,
I still don't have
and I'm like, yeah. Oh yeah, man. You don't want to see the inside of my house. But yeah, it's it took it took me later in life, but I came across a book that I think it was a Marine who wrote it. I could be wrong. It might have been a soldier, but the book is called "Why Is Dad Mad All the Time?" And I bought that book, and somebody, either the author or somebody, told me, they said, you just get that book and you put it out where they can see it. You don't need to do anything else. You just, they'll figure it out. They'll read it or whatever. And, I got the book. I'm kind of flipping through. I'm like, this is kind of corny. This is Berenstain Bears kind of level, where it's one sentence on a page, whatever. And then a while back, I saw it and I looked at the book and I'm like, it doesn't look like anybody's even opened it. And then I mentioned it one time, and I found out that all my kids had opened it and read it. And I asked them, was it helpful at all? And they were all saying yes. And I'm like, so I bring that up, Jason, because while maybe not for you, but maybe people you work with that may be in these kind of situations where they got young kids that don't understand and they don't know how to ask. And the book was done in a really good way to make it easy to get the moral of the story across to kids. And while they don't have to have the details or whatever, but they can understand, oh, okay, this isn't me when this happens because Dad's being a different person.
Right.
Yeah, it's a great book. I pitch it whenever I can because it had so much impact that I didn't even know that it did. and Luis, I don't envy that task, man. I don't know how you're going to edit that, or even how Christina could edit it. Right? It's like maybe you give your oldest some incentive and how to learn how to edit it, and then he'll be super objective, right?
Right.
Or at least you won't cut out the parts that are hard for you.
Yeah. So,
Man.
but Jason, it has been a pleasure, gentlemen. We've been at this for 2 hours now.
I don't talk about it.
Oh my gosh. That second hour went by so quick, man.
It did. But Jason, that just a testament to the quality of person that you are and your genuineness of wanting to help with mental health and your openness about your life and the struggles that you went through. So I really do appreciate you sharing your story with us tonight.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on, and
I can't thank all of you guys enough. I was so excited when I got the email from Doc, but I didn't even know half of what even tonight was. So I can't tell you what it does. Helps just me only, but just doing what you guys are doing too is just getting the word out and just having those real life conversations. I have so much respect for that. So I can't thank you guys enough for having me on and taking the shot and letting me come on.
Oh, The pleasure's been ours, man.
Yeah, I mean,
Definitely has.
one hand wash the other. You let me shoot my mouth off for the better part of 2 hours. The top of my goddamn lungs on yours. And I thought, by goddamn time we return the favor. Anytime you want to come back and do this again, you just let us.
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you. Good night.
We'll see you out there, man. Keep doing good work.